Good afternoon. My name is Pat Limbach. I serve as the Vice President for Research at the University of Cincinnati, and I want to welcome you to our panel on sustainability issues. I am going to introduce our moderator of this panel, and then she will introduce the panelists. So let me start by introducing Ryan Mooney-Bullock. She is the Executive Director for Green Umbrella. Green Umbrella's programs work across public, private, and educational sectors to design strategies for decreasing pollution, ensuring equitable access to nature, and adapting to our changing climate. Quite a lot, Ryan. And most pleasingly, Ryan and her team are partners with us at the University of Cincinnati in the new Digital Futures building on the 6th floor. Ryan is most energized when she is helping people make connections between their passions and what is going on in the natural and human worlds around them. I will also point out before I pass the mic over to Ryan that throughout this panel discussion, if you have questions for the online audience, please go ahead and put those into the chat. Those of you who are here in person, just raise your hand. We can take questions as we move throughout this conversation. So just let us know and we'll bring the mic to you. But with that, I'm happy to turn it over to Ryan.
Thanks, Pat. Yeah, and actually we're going to turn things on you a little bit as well. So there will be a few times when we pose questions back at you, and hope that you'll consider chiming in with what your area of research is telling you or what your company is telling you around those issues. Keep it brief so we all have a chance to contribute, but thanks for making this as interactive as possible today. So excited to introduce the panelists that we have on stage today. I'll start with Tim Donovan down there. He is a founding partner and CEO of Donovan Energy. He has dedicated his career to energy management and optimization with expertise spanning financial modeling, investment strategy, budget development, planning, and corporate structure. He's played a key role in several clean energy and sustainability industry firsts, including the first net zero energy aviation facility, the first LEED rated gas station, and the redevelopment of several buildings incorporating sustainability and energy concepts. Lots of amazing other background that I'll leave for another time. Thank you, Tim, for being here with us. Cincinnati City Council member Mika D. Owens was born and raised right here in Cincinnati. She is currently the chair of the Climate, Environment, and Infrastructure Committee, one of the first local government committees in the country to prioritize climate change, and also serves on the Budget and Finance Committee and as the vice chair of the Equitable Growth and Housing Committee. She's worked professionally as a trainer, facilitator, consultant, and small business owner. And one thing I learned about her recently is that in 2018, she joined the administration of then Clerk of Court, Aftab Purval, as the Social Responsibility Officer. And one of the things she did was managing environmentally sustainable activities within the office. She's an organizer at heart and helped co-found the Greater Cincinnati Voter Collaborative in 2020 to protect access to voting for all Hamilton County voters. Thanks for being here. And finally, Dr. Rick Michelman is the president and CEO of Michelman and has 27 years of escalating leadership roles in that company. His experience spans product development, technology management, enterprise software implementation, new business development, regional leadership, and business segment leadership. With a PhD in chemistry from the University of California at Berkeley, Rick applies his scientific knowledge to lead Michelman's efforts towards innovating a sustainable future through the strategic use of raw materials, energy, and water. So hopefully that gives you a sense that we have three very different panelists with totally different backgrounds, but all really passionate about clean and green tech and how to make sure that we are all working towards a sustainable economy. I'm going to switch to my facilitation notes here. All right. So I am going to pose some questions to the panelists, and like I said earlier, we'll jump in every now and then with questions to you. So to kind of get us started, I would love to hear what challenges or what types of challenges your organization specializes in solving when it comes to working towards a sustainable economy and healthy environment, And we're going to start with Councilmember Owens.
Oh, what a pleasure. Thank you. First of all, so much for UC for convening us together. I feel when I walked in the room, there was such synergy already. So I know that we're going to walk away with tons of ideas and conversations that are going to happen. So I look forward to being a part of that. Thank you for having me here today. So I think one thing that we've learned at the city is that engagement matters. And so through our Green Cincinnati plan, which is, my 30-second elevator speech, our carbon reduction strategies since 2008 in various sectors, from mobility to buildings to resilience to food access, right? And so how we get better and better at that. And so this plan is largely built on community voices. It's not really, the city saying, hey, this is what we're going to do. It is us going out and engaging deeply in communities to hear from folks. And so what we did in order to do that is to be able to invest a historic $4 million in this past budget into OES to do that work, because partnerships matter as well. And so we also know that people proximate to the issue are the folks that have the solutions. And so when we're thinking about climate change and frontline priority communities, it's important that we engage with them. And so we were able to strengthen and broaden that conversation of climate change and its impact in communities because of our partnership, because of putting our dollars where our mouth, money where our mouth is, but also strengthening our partnerships with folks like Groundwork, Ohio River Valley, Green Umbrella, to be able to do that deep engagement around climate safe neighborhoods. So that's what we've learned to do effectively, and the numbers have only increased as people have engaged in this plan over the decades.
Awesome. So I hear making sure that we're getting community input and leadership before we say what are the challenges. Like, we want to really have that be informed by the folks that are being affected.
Absolutely.
Rick.
Well, I'll tell you that the chemical industry, as most know, have a kind of a mixed feeling in the world, right? The chemical industry is capable of tremendous positive change making, but it also has some baggage that comes with it through time. So the challenge that we throw at ourselves is this purpose that you just heard a few minutes ago of innovating a sustainable future. How do we use the powers of innovation to make radical change to bring betterment to both society and the world? And it sounds kind of heady, it's a big challenge, but we think it can be done through a chemical environment. And we've, through numbers of years, evolved ourselves where we feel very comfortable that we're making a difference. And if you think about some of the big challenges that you face every day as a consumer, these are the same problems we're trying to solve, but in a very positive way. So think about getting more gas mileage from your automobile or more charge for your electric vehicle, so you get more miles and you can travel further safely in environmentally friendly manners. You can lightweight automobiles as another example, as part of this, so that, again, this all comes together. You can make your packaging sustainable. Think of the sugar sachets that are on your tables today, or whatever you use at home for a bag of potato chips. If these are then recyclable or reusable, that's another benefit that we can create by using positive chemistry. So this theme radiates through all we do. And as another big one, just think about paints, where you might use what's called a solvent-based paint or an oil-based paint. What if you could replace that with water-based chemistry? And water is a resource that we track and we're very cognizant of. You can solve some of the big problems that you've been solving today to keep your deck fresh, your house in great shape, and so many other things, anti-corrosion for metal, all these industrial places. So pulling it all together, you can have a business and a chemical business for good if you use innovation to help you solve problems. And that's how we think about what we do.
Awesome. And Tim.
Thanks, Ryan. We work in the built environment. So our space that we work in, primarily buildings, campuses, whatnot. And the primary challenge that we help our clients through is understanding the complexity of energy and carbon, and then taking them the step beyond that by developing and designing projects to actually deliver the abatement of that carbon. This kind of varies, practically it varies in a couple different ways. It might be something as simple as working with a company or an organization on a specific building, bringing strategies and technologies to reduce the energy consumption as much as possible, and then deploying renewable energy on top of that to help drive the carbon of that asset down. And it could be something completely infinitely more complex. Melissa Weidman's here from CVG. We just spent 6 months working on their energy and sustainability master plan. That way, we need to bring all kinds of technology solutions, programs, and capital to bear for them to be able to hit their stated objectives. So it can be quite simple or quite complex. From our standpoint, our strapline is energy's complex. We make it simple. We're a bunch of energy nerds. We understand tariff structures and rates and transmission and distribution and how energy actually moves around buildings, and bring that expertise to our clients.
Awesome. So we're going to dig a little bit deeper in terms of what each of your organizations are focusing on. Rick, what does Michelman's process of innovation look like?
Well, all right, so innovation has lots of different definitions depending on your industry and how you think about it. And for some people, it's just, hey, I thought of something and I just innovated. For us, the way that I like to play it through is it's got three parts. Creativity, that's the big idea. And you've heard the expression, any idea is a good idea. That's true, but some are better than others, right? So step one is what's the big idea? That's creativity. Part two, which is the hardest part, is connection. Who cares? And if you can put that big idea with a connection of someone who cares, you're on your way. And then part three is execution. You have to bring it through. If you don't have one, two, or three, you're going to struggle with the theme of innovation. That's how we define it. And again, as that fits into our purpose and how we, our strategies developed around this, we have to come up with those big ideas. We have to go hunt and find the people that care. Sometimes they'll call us because they know what we do, and they'll tell us the big problem, and we come up with an answer. But then it comes to the execution piece. So you need all three of them, and that's how we think about it.
Awesome. Councilmember Owens, obviously the Green Cincinnati plan has so many different areas of focus. I'm curious how Cincinnati is thinking about growth and innovation opportunities specifically related to the circular economy.
Absolutely. So first of all, I think the Green Cincinnati plan, just in existence, is a growth opportunity in how we attract people to the city. Young people are making decisions about where they want to live based on the sustainability plan. What is my company's ESG plan? And so being able to have that is a key, right? And so we've only gotten better over the course of time. To be able to say that, in this 2023 plan, this iteration, which we adopt this plan, every 5 years as the science and data is changing and evolving, we have aggressive goals. One is to reduce carbon emission by 50% by 2035 and to be carbon neutral by 2050. That also includes what are the key pillars and assets to this plan, which include sustainability, resilience, and equity, so that we know our policies are going to be very driven towards mitigating the wrong impacts of climate change. So that's one thing as a growth strategy. One way that we can also think about this is how we are becoming innovative and how we are growing from a workforce development perspective. What we've done within our human services funding is to be able to say, here are our priorities around all of these issues, eviction prevention being one thing, violence prevention, but workforce development being another thing where we can say, hey, to the administration, let's work on how we are attracting young people, women, people in this community for jobs of the future, and being very intentional there. But it's also innovating through our policies as well. And so when we're thinking about yard waste and how we are looking at composting and the post-recycling opportunities, that then becomes a part of the circular economy conversation, because how are we using composting? How are we looking at anaerobic digestion? All of these pieces. And so this is where, one, the innovation has to be the infrastructure that we have to build, and then be able to think about what are the technologies that can help support this new economy as well.
Awesome, and we'll follow up later with some of the consumer behavior issues that go into all of that. Tim, how is Donovan Energy rethinking what business success means?
I think, we look at it two different ways. So for our clients, we like to think that our work creates a competitive advantage for them. When we finish a project, we've in many cases increased the underlying value of their asset, reduced their operating expenses, and also shown a commitment to sustainability for their brand, for their employees, to attract new employees, similar to what Councilmember Owens was saying. We find that more and more companies are finding, or organizations are finding that to be important. For ourselves, it's about creating family-sustaining jobs in this kind of clean energy economy. We're very proud of the fact that we've kind of created a career path for folks that come to work with us where they can work in sustainability or clean energy, and have a path forward to whether they stay with us or whether they take their learnings that they get with us and go take them to other organizations. So we kind of define it for our clients. Define it one way. For us, it's our goals as Donovan Energy are all built around people and carbon. So, from a people perspective, those jobs are really, really important to us. From a carbon perspective, my partner Andy Holshouser is back there. As the owners of the company, we don't have financial goals that we set for ourselves. Our goals are carbon-based, and our primary goal is to abate the carbon that the Miami Fort power plant down in Miami Township here emits every year.
Wow.
So we're not there yet. We're about 20% of the way there. But as we continue to create new businesses and new, bigger, larger opportunities, we just finished a huge scope of work for GE Aerospace for their 20 largest manufacturing facilities around the world. As those projects start to come in, we know we'll hit that target. Hopefully we can get there before that plant closes, which I think it's scheduled to close in 5 years. So.
Wow, I'm sure that's very motivating for folks to come into work knowing they're not just trying to close deals and make amazing improvements for other people's companies, but also reach these really clear targets that resonate with their concern for the environment.
I can speak for Andy and I. It's probably our biggest motivator, and we love what we do. We have fun every day at work. We work with amazing clients and amazing employees. So.
Awesome. All right, everybody, get ready. Here's one of your questions coming up. So in the context of social determinants of health, which I'll just summarize briefly, is anything that affects somebody's health that is not based on their genetics or the type or quality of medical care they receive. So think of like all the factors that impact you in the world, whether it's your nutrition, environmental quality, how stressed you are because of your life, racism, other key factors. So in the context of social determinants of health, what green or clean tech innovations do you see on the horizon or that's available right now that could truly impact people's lives within the next 3 to 5 years? I'm going to start with Rick.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what we do and how we think about it, right? I'll back to that same theme, and Ryan and I were talking about this just before we started. You have to make decisions about what you do, and you have to make decisions about what you don't do. And the world is filled with opportunity or problems or challenges that have impact on all the items that Ryan just mentioned. So what we can have an impact very broadly are things like water and air. And so if we think about that and what we can do to help protect human health and create a clean environment, we've made some decisions. And amongst those decisions are to get involved in things like coatings for seeds so that they plant more readily, and we're putting people in position to feed the world better. Because each seed I'm trying to use a demo here, but each seed will plant at the right distance. They won't stick together. They'll stay protected from the environment, from microbes and everything else, and they'll grow into corn. So a lot of corn you find around the United States today and around the world has a teeny little treatment on the outside that just makes the corn grow better, and it has a positive impact on anyone because availability of food is really important. So we've made conscious decisions to invest more heavily there. Sustainability and packaging has been another one that we kind of hinted on before. And if you think about the paper cup that you see every day around the world, these are thrown around the street, they're found about. What if that cup could be more readily recycled? It can't be well today. We've made positive impacts on that as well. So the themes that we're working on, and I'll go to air, right? We talked about solvent-based paints to water-based paints. This is better for breathing in human consumption, and if something should spill into a creek, gosh forbid, the fish are gonna be okay. So conscious decisions, I think, Ryan, are one of the critical things that we have to do every day. Where do you invest and how do you make that available? The last thing that I'll add, because it's a big piece of our philosophy, all the other parts I talked about were really planet-positive products and solutions. A key theme is thinking about the chemistry that we use. And as chemistry evolves, we need to change ourselves as well. We learn more about the chemicals. There's things that we used to use that maybe are not as well thought of today because science has evolved, and we remove them from our product line. And then the final thing, and now really final thing I'll say, is the whole theme of a planet-positive footprint. How do our operations operate in a way that use less water, generate less solid waste, and use less energy? I'll be fair to the renewables, from sources that generate less favorable environmental conditions. So we try to put all that together.
Great. All right, now I want to hear from you all. What innovations are you working on or do you see on the horizon that can have real impacts on human health in the next 3 to 5 years? And raise your hand and Tony will bring the mic over. I will call on people.
Sure. Rich Granger with Drive Ohio, part of the Ohio Department of Transportation. Our team is helping to oversee the state's national electric vehicle infrastructure program, installation of charging stations all across the state, which has equity built into it through the Justice 40 initiative. So Very important ways to make sure that communities are receiving that help with electric vehicles and the jobs that go with it. Could not agree more about workforce development. That happens to be my role, whether it's preschool visits or other things like that. So important work there, I think.
And huge air quality improvements, right, coming out of the shift to electric vehicles. All right, who else?
So much. I'm Dion Dionisi from Environmental Engineering and Science program. My expertise is primarily on water treatment. So currently I'm focusing on various aspects from harmful algae blooms, prevention, understanding, mitigation of the toxins they produce. Also, a lot of my work is focusing on contaminants of emerging concern. And there we develop technologies, advanced technologies, nanotechnologies for selective removal and selective destruction of pollutants, from pharmaceutical residues to perfluorinated chemicals and so on. So I think it's a very exciting field, and I like that there is a lot of focus on water, air, purification, and so on. Thank you.
Ryan, what's neat about some of these comments that, that we're hearing is that while the work is being done here in Cincinnati or comments are being done in the area, these all have global impact. So I know that's coming later, but just a big important
Absolutely,
thing to
and
pull out.
I kind of want to echo the comment about water, right? We hear so much lately about water. Yeah, and I'll go to Elisa in just a minute, if that's okay.
Hi guys, Elisa Smith from Centrifuge. I'm really excited about technologies that are being used to improve circularity, and such that it can be, whatever the output is, can be used somewhere else. So an example is Intersect AG, which is a local startup, and what they're doing is they're using black fly larvae to digest food waste. So they're focusing on spent grain, but this can be any food waste, and that is being converted into protein, which can then be converted into animal feed and dog food and cat food. So to me, that's really exciting.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Hi, Pete Petrie. I work with Rick at Michelman. I thought you were going to go here, Rick, relative to health. The forever chemicals that we are now hearing a lot about, and I think the gentleman down in the corner referenced fluorochemicals. And so we have products that, and these chemicals are water resistant and oil and grease resistant, and you might find them in your Chipotle bowl, for example, the takeaway containers. So we're developing coatings to replace that, that chemistry with something that doesn't have those forever chemicals in it. So really proud of that effort with the company.
Not to put Waterworks on the spot, but do you want to say anything, Alex?
Yes.
Awesome.
Hi, Alex Schmitz, Cincinnati Waterworks. And water's been touched on a lot here, so I appreciate everyone bringing that up. You mentioned, what we're doing for public health. At the Waterworks, we really have a deep connection to public health. Water's used in everyday life from beginning to end of the day for most people. So we put a lot of that into it. There's a lot that goes into treating that water and making sure it can be there for everyone. And I think all these innovations here, changing different chemicals that can, make the product well, but also support the environment, it comes full circle when that water comes to us that we clean and get back out to everybody else. So I think it's all tied together, and I appreciate everyone's comments.
And I just want to, give a shout out. Cincinnati is making its mark on the world in so many ways, right? We know how awesome we are. But Kathy Bailey from Cincinnati Waterworks is literally sharing with the nation, if not the world, the amazing processes that were developed locally to help get lead pipes out of our system. I'm sure there's many other innovations she's sharing as well, but we truly are a leader in that space and many others.
And Ryan, I will just also give a PSA for the city. If you've not heard about the Citizens Water Academy, please go through it because it gives you a very eye-opening kind of backstage, look at Greater Cincinnati Waterworks, and it's really fascinating, the history. So please sign up for that.
And I want to see, Tim and Mika, if you have anything you want to add on the health-related innovation.
Sure. Social determinants of health is an area that I love to talk about because it traverses so many things and decisions that we make collectively as a city, but collectively as a community. And so when we think about the built environment and we think about the Green Cincinnati plan, and again, what do we need to do in communities that need investment? Something like tree canopy is like low-hanging fruit. And so because of the work of UC climate equity indicators, we now know the snapshot of climate change across zip codes. And we know what the the health impacts look like in terms of asthma, in terms of impervious surfaces. And so from a decision-making standpoint around development, how we're using land, like these are important guiding points for us. In fact, we even said in this next Green Cincinnati plan, let's make sure we're refreshing the climate equity indicators as well so that we know that these two things are aligning themselves. So that's one thing. I'm glad that you brought up electric vehicles because with the infrastructure dollars from the federal government, we have the opportunity to build out that infrastructure, and so that has its own benefit in terms of reduction there. Another thing that we look at, and these are just a few examples, but another thing that we look at is how we're electrifying homes. And so as we look at our, value of abatements and being able to incentivize those kind of things, that's a part of that. Something I'm really excited about too in terms of the Green Cincinnati plan is also how are we leveraging a Green Cincinnati fund to be able to help across social determinants of health when we're looking at, hey, I'm a low-income single-family homeowner, but I want to install solar panels in this community that I know has 1% tree canopy anyway. Like these are places where we can leverage, and thank goodness for, again, those partnerships that help us to think through these innovative ideas like Green Umbrella and being able to build out that framework. Other things like, hey, can I install bioswales, rain gardens within my own property? And so these are very important conversations because ultimately it is about how do we improve social determinants of health in communities.
Just a shout out for policy, I think, just to echo on that. We've seen, at the federal level, the dollars that were included in the Inflation Reduction Act, specifically geared towards climate. I think the right policies, when enacted, can have huge effects. Getting to those policies is often tricky. There are some unintended consequences to policies as we've seen before as well. But for example, building electrification is something that we're very passionate about. California, they're removing gas hookups. They've banned gas hookups for new developments. City of San Francisco just mandated the removal of all gas hookups for their city and county-owned buildings. So what does that mean? That means an entity like San Francisco Airport, which gets about 46% of their load from thermal gas from a massive central plant, that has to be ripped out and replaced. At the same time, we're adding all this load for EVs and other electrification. That policy is an important policy. That deadline that puts on it is going to make it really tough to hit. If they hit it, they can and show that it can be done. Though there's I think it's the end, or it's the beginning of the end for the gas infrastructure in this country, particularly the gas infrastructure that comes into all of our homes, which is poisonous.
Yeah. And I do want to give a quick plug. Green Umbrella's been working with the city for over a decade on the Green Cincinnati plan, and one of the learnings that has come out of that is Cincinnati is literally the only community out of 188 in the 10-county region that has anything close to a climate or sustainability plan. Right. I believe 8 others have an energy-specific plan. And so we have been building out what's called a regional climate collaborative to help serve all of the other communities and use Cincinnati as kind of a guiding light for how we can work not only collaboratively across the region, but to get each of those jurisdictions to be thinking through how they can protect their residents' health and prepare for changing climate. All right, switching gears, given that Cincinnati is uniquely positioned as the headquarters of a number of big manufacturers, I think we tend to focus a lot on their role in sustainable business practices, which is huge, right? Like that's a key part of so many decision making. But the behavioral change at a consumer and community level is also key in terms of how we're able to achieve sustainability targets. And it can kind of be the trickiest nut to crack in a lot of ways because there's so many more people that need to be influenced and so much culture that needs to be rethought. So I'm curious, what do you see as the next frontier in inspiring individuals to act, whether that be in their homes and neighborhoods, at the store, at the ballot box? And this is another one that I'm going to open up to all of you, but we'll kick it off with Mika.
Oh, wonderful. So much opportunity. This is where things get really fun because, again, going back to that Green Cincinnati plan, that's all of these different sections, one of which is education and advocacy. And so my lifelong goal is to make sure everyone in this city knows about the Green Cincinnati plan and to the point of individual behavior, and we're getting there, but to the point of individual behavior change, that's where we've got to make sure we're doing deep engagement work. Let's just start with recycling, right? If we can get more people to do that in their homes, that's a win. Reducing less tonnage to the landfill, that's certainly a win for all of us. And so it's being able to, what I find is the opportunity of taking these very lofty ideas, concepts, and really drilling them down, distilling them down to meeting people where they're at. And so that's the equity piece in this conversation that we're talking about, bringing people who have historically not been a part of this conversation. And so language has to change as well as we think about that. Small businesses are a part of this. When I walk into a business and I'm ready to throw something away, sometimes I don't know, right? Do I take the top off? Do I put that here? Do I put that there? So there's opportunity for us to really make sure the consumer, the individual really understands what this means, but what this means globally as well. So I get excited because, again, once this Green Cincinnati plan comes to council and we pass it, this is where all of the work actually begins. So we'll be able to co-create together.
Awesome. And now I want to open up to all of you. What opportunities for innovation are you seeing when it comes to behavior change?
Hi.
I think it'll come on.
Okay. Hi, Donna Zaring with Centrifuge. I just wanted to follow up on Mika, your comments about recycling and innovation that's happening in the city. Centrifuge is actually hosting a hackathon this April that invites the community into that innovation process around recycling. So when we think about behavior change, but also looking at our region's corporations and how we might innovate to make it easier for people to make the right choices. So not only creating awareness and how do we innovate startups or policy around that, but on the manufacturing side, how are we making it easier for them to choose the right thing? And Michelman is actually participating in that effort, as is Donovan Energy. And I'll just make a plug for anybody who's got innovative ideas for recycling, supply chain, data transparency, all of that. We are opening up for innovation in partnership with the City of Cincinnati.
Awesome.
This April.
And we're so grateful for Centrifuge being a part of the solutions.
Well, as we're waiting for others who might chime in, I'll make a couple comments. One around decisions that Mika kind of hinted at. Every one of us makes a decision every day, and yet the biggest decisions that are made in terms of recycling in any city probably happen in the back room of a department store or a retailer like a Kroger or anybody else. It might be a kid or an employee who's just back there looking at all the boxes that come in, and they're the ones that have to make the decision, does this go to landfill or does this go to the recycling bin? One costs them money to haul away, the other actually makes them money. Recycling is, it's good for everybody. So educating not just all of us, but educating the people that work in large movements of packaging or waste streams, they're the ones that are huge decision makers. So that's point one. And I'll throw in a point two as well. You're all here today because you have some interest in this topic. And maybe a little bit of a call to action. You have the ability to make a difference yourself, of course. You're interested, you're here, you're listening in, or you're sitting in the room. And if I think about what some of our team members that have joined today here do, Brian Becker's involved with Alloy, but Brian Becker's also involved in the hackathon that you mentioned just a second ago. And Pete's involved, with many of the things that go on in Michelman, particularly with sustainable packaging. But Pete's also involved with the Centrifuge and Flywheel Sustainable Cincinnati initiative. So these are things that we're doing here at a local level that educate others and pull people into the infrastructure and this ecosystem that we have in Cincinnati that's really unique. And every single one of you have the ability to make that difference too.
My name is Lilith Yegiazarian. I'm a professor of environmental engineering. At UC, I also direct a digital infrastructure project called Urban Flooding Open Knowledge Network. I think that in terms of social and behavioral change, it is true that education plays a huge role in that. But I think that there has to be a feedback loop of sorts between individuals and technologies with which they interact and utilities that govern how, not govern, but in a way help figure out how to use water and energy. So I'll give you a couple of examples. I have a washing machine from, I think, LG, and it has a default setting. It's so easy. I just push the button, and it sets in. It sets at warm water. So if that machine came with a cold water default, I wouldn't be even thinking twice. So here's a connection with a manufacturer that can interact with me as an individual, make my life easier. I don't have to think how to twist that thing. I just push the button and it works. It's just one house. Imagine how many houses if that change were implemented would make a difference. It would be just an enormous amount of saving. So that's number one. The second point is related to who said smart and connected cities. Somebody said that. Anyway, so think about the opportunities of having feedback loops between utilities and individual households. It's all, again, about making my life as a customer easy. So if the utility had a way of interacting with me through the technology in reducing, let's say, the temperature in my house by 0.5 degree. Again, think about the scaling up of all these impacts. So I think it's on us as technologists, as policy developers, and individuals to think about these interfaces between humans, technologies, policies, utilities, and you're going from a micro scale of a house and an individual all the way to national scale impacts. So I would like to invite some comments on that. I would really love to hear what you guys think about it.
One of the things we're going to come back to in a little bit is how, in so many ways, the technology is already there to scale up, and it's just a matter of figuring out what are the levers to make that happen and when.
Hello, I'm Amanda Petzinger. I lead the Sustainability and ESG Digital Solutions practice at Benchmark Digital, a local and global software company. And just to kind of build off of these feedback loops that you were mentioning, I think the importance of individual actions can't be understated. But in the grand scheme of things, it is corporations and governments that are really at the scale where there is the most impact available on the climate crisis. And so I think we were having some conversations over lunch about the East Palestine train derailment and the impacts to those communities and how long that has remained in the news cycle, which I think has been a little bit surprising for me, considering that I keep an eye on these types of topics and they usually are in and out, but this one has had some staying power. And so I think from an individual action perspective, inspiring people to hold companies and governments accountable and to try and drive change from their end of the social contract, I think is really important. I mean, I think we all should be recycling. I think we should be using less plastic straws and things like that. But on the grand scale of the climate crisis, it is corporations and government entities that really are going to have the biggest impact.
Yeah, fantastic panel. So this is a bit of a selfish question because I've been asking myself it late at night. I know some of my colleagues are as well, but About $1 billion in federal funding is about to rain over communities across infrastructure, CHIPS and science, and IRA, which is basically a climate tech bill. And about a third of that money will be dependent on large corporations leaning in. And so I wanted to ask the panelists, if you just had 5 minutes with John Moeller, Rodney from Kroger, or maybe the CEO of GE Aviation, just 5 minutes, like, what would you ask them to do in light of that context? Where would you ask them to lean in? We've already got them in the recycling hack, so you can't say that. But beyond that, that would really move the needle so that we would truly be a green leadership hub.
So I'll start with a quick thought. And so thanks for the question, Pete. And I think just to make sure we're paraphrasing the question right, it's about accessing that money to make a difference in the world here by our efforts here in Cincinnati. Is that the question? Get me close.
To dramatically change the course of business. It's all part of the U.S. industrial policy.
Yeah.
So it's all about competitiveness, leapfrogging Europe, but it's heavily dependent on big companies leaning in and saying we want to co-invest.
Right. Okay. Well, I'll give a corner of the perspective, and I'm sure the other panelists have other thoughts too. Let's go back to the theme of innovation, right? Big companies are often, and this is your business, Pete, at some level too, right? Big companies are often a little bit slower at innovation. And when we're talking about trying to make radical change here and pick up the pace with which change occurs, sometimes it's the smaller entity or the different entity or the unique or unusual or even awkward idea that gives enhanced leverage. So the 5-minute conversation would be about how do you open up or democratize the conversation about how one could do that in an effort to pick up pace and speed, rather than just giving it to the regular cast of characters who may sit on it or use it the way that they've always used it. That's just a pocket of your answer, but we got 3 of us here.
No, I think it's the same thing. I think one, it's what is the global conversation that we're having around being able to be competitive for these federal dollars? How are we looking at that together? I think it's also thinking about how are we building a city that is climate resilient for the future, being proactive about that. And so thinking about the circular economy, thinking about what green banking can do for this region, but also let's talk about industry. And so let's really talk about what PFAS means and how we eliminate that in the products and the things that we're seeing in our city assets. How do we test for that? But how do we hold people accountable as well? And so I actually just had a conversation with Congressman Landsman today about this. And so making sure that we are on the same page from a federal to a local level is going to be pretty important. So just a few updates on my end.
Yeah, I think it's a tough spot because the shareholders of these large companies have very specific requirements that they're trying to get. Often, when you incorporate sustainability, you need to take a little bit of a different view, or at least not a quarter-to-quarter view, which is how the corporate world tends to act. So by looking at, if I could get to the boards of these companies and convince them that taking a longer-term view, incorporating life cycle costs and total cost of ownership into the evaluation of these projects, we do a lot of third-party finance on deals because you get to these large CapEx deals to kind of help with reducing the operating expense of these things. They don't quite fit into the capital improvement plans of these large organizations. I mentioned, the airports that we work with. They're very interested in sustainability, but if it comes down to a terminal modernization program or investing in a central plant, what are they going to? What are their passengers or their constituents? What are they going to notice? Nobody ever sees a central plant, except for UCs, which, by the way, I love driving down and seeing the central plant on MLK every time I drive down MLK and Vine. But those things are typically hidden away, and we're working with San Francisco Airport. They're going to invest $2 billion and bury it all under the ground where no one can see it. That's a big ask for politicians to say, I'm going to commit this much budget, or for boards or companies to say this. So any large organization, I guess I would encourage a different lens, not exclusive. You can continue to look at your capital projects the way that you do, but apply a different lens to it for these projects, because they have, just like our oil-based economy has externalities, that we have petroleum projects with products which are an unbelievably cheap way to get horsepower. And we pay, when we're paying $3 a gallon for gas, that you can drive 40 miles on that, that's amazing when you think about it. It shouldn't be $3 a gallon, though. It should be about $15 a gallon if we take into account the externality of the carbon that is emitted as that. And if we had that $15 a gallon price, one, people would drive less, they would use it less, or they would use it more discerningly. And two, there would be this revenue stream to abate this carbon problem that we have created for ourselves. So again, just the different framing of that. But that's a great question, Pete.
I'll throw in one more really quick, which is, comment, I think everybody on the panel will say the same things, and Mika's going to make it happen anyway, that green jobs are good, right? You don't, green energy or better chemistry or whatever it might be is good for society, and it creates jobs. And, as we talk about, green Cincinnati and all the things that can occur, it's not a either or, it's a yes and. You can get both.
Yeah. All right, we've got about, oh yeah, go for it.
I just wanted to highlight something very important that Tim just mentioned. How do you calculate the value? How do you calculate your cost benefit? How do you do the cost benefit analysis? What do you include? Right? So my question or my request would be, tell me what are your data sources? How do you make decisions? How do you bring data to the decisions, and what factors in your decisions? So actually, I would like to pose that question to the panelists and ask you guys, what are the data sources for your own decision in your business? And I know the answers are going to be completely different because you're doing very different things, and the scale of what you're doing is very different also. I also want to ask you, what are the pain points and challenges and gaps in data that you need to make decisions that would be holistic, that would take into account all these externalities, and that would be sustainable?
I'll start. So making better data-informed decisions across all of the city is like top priority for me. And so specific to this area, based on a conversation that I was having with, let's just say, business community in terms of events and large-scale events that come to the city and how we can make them more sustainable, while uncovering the fact that they've got to ask their own questions to be able to get to these data points so that we as a city can interface with them in that way too. But I think it's also, folks like Flywheel and Centrifuge that are being able to help these type of startups to be able to work with governments to be able to make these kind of decisions internally is important. And so innovation in just how we are thinking as government decision makers, how we're leveraging technology in that is extremely important. So I'm always interested in having that kind of conversation around that nexus. So an ongoing conversation for sure.
Sure. I'll give you one real quick one. Tim and I had a conversation within the context of the meeting dialogue flow. And so your point on data, it matters to us, all of us dramatically. How one calculates carbon footprints or greenhouse gas emissions is getting better every day, but it's still really complex. So the quicker and more rapidly that there's standardization of how that's done puts everybody in a common format. And today it's a little bit like the Wild West, I think.
Yeah, it's getting there. I think through the concept of ESG, we've seen kind of private equity-backed large companies have now instituted ESG programs within their businesses or organizations. That has a really interesting effect on all the way down through the supply chain, right? Because the GHG protocol kind of defines the different scopes of emissions, scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. Well, not to get too far down the weeds, but your scope 3 emissions are everything that, kind of outside of your direct control. As large organizations try to get their hands around this, it's starting to drive down into the supply chain. So we're getting phone calls from folks saying, I've just been asked to put an ESG plan together. I don't even know what it is, but I'm going to lose my largest client if we don't do it. that's a very good sign, I think. In our business, we're a relatively smaller entity in this mix. But the data that we look for, and we do make decisions. We make our decisions on who we work with, on who we hire, where our procurement dollars go, based off of data that we collect around D&I. So we collect from all of our vendors. We want to know what your ownership structure looks like, and we use that information to make decisions. We make those same decisions internally when we're evaluating candidates to come work for us. So I think the data is important. It's getting better. I can list off kind of the data that we grab, because we don't sell sustainability. We sell a financial return. Because at the end of the day, you can't sell sustainability back to your board to get those CapEx dollars. But if I show you what the NPV, IRR, SIR is of your product, you can go back into your financial organization and then sell that. So the data that we're grabbing around energy consumption, around energy mix, we know what the energy mix is in the region for the power that we consume. So it's kind of easy for us to kind of show what the direct carbon footprint is today, and what it'll be when we once the abatement is complete.
Kind of in lieu of closing remarks, I have one final question that we'll ask the panelists to answer that hopefully kind of sums up this conversation that we've just been having. So this week, the UN released what the Secretary General describes as the how-to guide to defuse the climate time bomb. We know that so many of the solutions that we need have already been developed 20 years ago, last year. I mean, there is so much out there, and it's been a matter of figuring out how to scale it, getting it to the right price point, getting the political buy-in or the business buy-in to actually execute it. So I'm just curious to hear each of your thoughts around what you see as kind of the next opportunity, or how that plugs into the work that you're doing. The solutions are here. We just need to move into warp speed to get them implemented.
I mean, I think you just said it. So for us, it's, again, I can't underscore the importance of our plan, right? You just mentioned we are one of the only cities, municipalities to have a blueprint in how we move forward. And so making sure that, one, that plan is only getting better and more aggressive as we continue to move forward. But it's formats like this that allow us to continue to share and think about innovation. And that also means we have to take these conversations to other jurisdictions. And so that regional climate collaborative is going to be so important in building a cohesive, how do we move regionally, and then ultimately, how do we move at a state level as well? Because there is still opportunity for us to carve out what is our Ohio state sustainability plan.
So we operate a small venture studio inside of Donovan Energy, and long story short, but we do a lot of EV charging infrastructure. And we realized there was a better model, but it couldn't sit inside our company. So we kind of launched our first company, which is a company called Electrata. That company is now kind of out independently working. We've had 3 companies now that we've released, all with a nexus of carbon. Our next business that we're going to focus on is around sustainable aviation fuel, which is which will be a huge way to decarbonize the aviation sector, which is an incredibly hard sector to decarbonize. We're looking at solar in the right of way, working with a couple of different state Department of Transportations around how do we put solar in this land that is it's marginal land. You can't use it for anything else. Why can't it be producing? So by running this venture studio, we're looking for ways to take these technologies that are going to get us out and drive them through to execution and scale.
Awesome.
And I'll say, with you, again, trying to not be redundant, I'd say talk about policy, not politics. That'll be huge on its own, because that'll open the floodgates to let things happen. And then number 2, have a plan. Have a plan, make a plan, and don't get trapped by what I used to call sustainability angst. It's hard, I can't figure it out, it'll never work, we can't do that here. You can, have a plan.
Yeah, and you can call me if you need help with that. Shameless plug.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for your thoughts, and for all of you for sharing today. One of the things that Pat mentioned earlier is that the Digital Futures Building is one place that these types of conversations are ongoing around how can partnerships form between researchers, government, business, nonprofit organizations to keep this work moving forward in innovation.
Yeah, thank you, Ryan. And I want to, again, thank all the panelists. Let's give them a round of applause. So those who are virtual and in person, thank you all so much for your participation, and we wish you a good rest of your afternoon. Who are here in the room, we ask that you just stay 1 second because we would like to recognize the panelists with a little gift from the University of Cincinnati Office of Research. So, Jennifer, Tony, Margot, can you? All help. So you all have to stand up. It's going to be photo time. Thank you. There's yours.
There's Ryan.
Thank you all. And I want to point out one other thing that is important to the University of Cincinnati, and I want to thank Rick in particular. His dad could not make it here today, but part of the reason we are hosting this panel is that his father has created a Green Clean Tech Innovation Fund at the University of Cincinnati to spur new research in the types of things that were talked about here today. And in fact, one of the awardees in the first year of that fund is Professor Neil Ayers, who's right here. And we have some other folks in the room who have been applicants for that fund, and I'm working with the team on the evaluations right now. So expect to see more coming out of UC around this, thanks in no small part to your dad. And sorry your dad couldn't be here, Rick, but thank you very much. So everybody, again, thank you all for coming. Don't forget to pick up your pen and your folder and have a great afternoon.